Welcome to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Building Supply. I'm your host, Don Magruder. We're outside a beautiful home here in Lady Lake, Florida, just outside the Villages, and today we're going to talk about homeowners insurance during a hurricane. A lot of people are confused, and there's a lot of stipulation in homeowners policies that really people don't understand. So today I have an expert who's joining me to explain the ins and outs of homeowners insurance and how it's different during hurricanes. Angela Taylor, she is the owner of Frank Slaughter Insurance here in Wildwood, and she's an expert when it comes to homeowners insurance. She's a traditional insurance agent that sits down with customers and explains their policies. So today we're going to ask her a lot of questions that you probably want to ask. So with that, Angela Taylor, thank you for coming out here and talking with us today. First off, tell us about Angela Taylor and the Frank Slaughter Insurance Agency.
Well, first, thanks for having me out here. I appreciate you and Romac. Frank Slaughter Insurance Agency was established back in 1964 by my grandfather, Frank, and we have been serving the community ever since. We're in the Tri-County area, and we focus primarily on the personal lines risk, which would be your home and your vehicle and your golf carts and your umbrellas and your fun pursuits like boats and jet skis. We really focus on our client. Our motto is, we treat you like a person, not a policy. And we really try to educate our clients. And right now, with all that we have going on, I feel like education's so important, especially with hurricane season.
And what we found out in Hurricane Irma a few years ago, a lot of people didn't understand their homeowners policy. And that's what we're here about today. So let's just dive right into it. Let's talk about hurricane deductibles. Now, we're sitting out at this house. You insure this home. This is a home that was built in 2005. The cost basis was $495,000 before the pool. The pool and fence was additional $93,000. 2005 home. Talk about the difference between hazard like fire coverage under your homeowner's policy and hurricane deductibles. What would be the deductibles under each, Angela?
Okay, well first I really want to talk about when the deductible is triggered. Okay, so we are in Florida, and the moment that a hurricane watch or warning is triggered, even if it's for the Keys, your hurricane deductible is on board.
So even though I'm 500 miles away?
Even if you are anywhere in the state of Florida, if one of the farthest point from you has got a hurricane watch or warning, that hurricane deductible is triggered for everyone that has a home.
Because they feel like a tornado will spin off.
You just don't know.
Yep.
We just don't know.
Okay.
And then what happens is that warning or watch, it of course continues until that storm has moved on. And that deductible expires 72 hours after that hurricane watch or warning has expired. Now, once we know it's triggered, you got to look at your policy to see what your deductible is, because each company is different. Some of them say if your home's valued over $200,000 or $250,000, you've got a 2% deductible. I've seen a 3% deductible. I have seen companies that will let you buy back a low deductible.
Okay.
Let's remember, the whole point of this hurricane deductible is to keep our companies viable, because when you have a hurricane, it's expected that you're going to have a lot of claims, and that means the insured needs to kind of help share a little bit more of the risk or exposure.
But like this house, say this house, not during a hurricane, burnt to the ground.
Yes.
The deductible is?
Your all other perils deductible, which might be $500 or $1,000 or $2,500.
It's a set deductible like $2,500.
Correct.
All right, say we have a hurricane in August, rips the roof off, rips this off. The value according to the insurance agency is $600,000.
Yeah, so what you would have if it's during hurricane season and it's a hurricane loss, you would have a 2% deductible on this home, which would mean $12,000.
2% of the value of the home.
Of dwelling A coverage.
So that's where a lot of people get confused. So if it burns completely down to the ground without hurricane season, it may be a $2,500 deductible. But if a hurricane takes the roof off and destroys it, it's a $12,000 2% deductible.
2% of whatever the home is covered for on the policy page, not 2% of the loss amount.
So that means, say the roof costs $15,000 to put on. Before the insurance company would pay, I would have to pay $12,000 out of pocket.
Correct.
A lot of people don't understand that. Okay, Other big questions. Now, we're in a perfect area of the yard. We have this pool enclosure. What's typically covered on a pool enclosure?
I'm going to direct you back to your insurance policy because every company is different. What is most important, 99% of the companies require you to have it scheduled. So number one, your insurance agent should know about the pool enclosure. So if it's something you did during COVID and you haven't talked to your agent, pick up the phone now and call them because it's very important. Some companies, they'll cover this pool enclosure for actual cash value, but they'll exclude the screening.
Okay.
Others will cover the aluminum supports for replacement, but exclude the screening. And then some are lucky and they actually have the full screened enclosure covered at replacement cost up to the policy limit. So if you haven't had a review and you scheduled it for $10,000 5 years ago, because of building costs increasing, we might need an adjustment. So call your agent.
And that's an important point you just made. The Romac Building Supply Whole House Commodity Index from June 2020 to 21 is up 64%. So the valuations that you have on your house from last year don't apply this year, do they? So that's very important that you do that review, isn't it?
It is, because I tell you, each company handles it differently, but many of them have an inflation factor, but the inflation factor on your renewal might be maybe 2 or 3%. And when I do reviews with customers, whether they're new or existing, they really have a hard time grasping. We're looking at the cost to rebuild your home, not market value, not what you paid for it 10 years ago. We've got to have current values, or you could have a co-insurance problem.
Okay. What about the swimming pool? What if a tree were to crash in that pool and damage there? Is there any coverage on the pool?
Yeah, you've got coverage on the pool, especially with the description you have. The question on the pool is that, once again, the company, is it other structure coverage or is it part of your house?
Okay.
And each company is a little different. Again, I'm going to encourage you, you've got to call your agent if this is a new introduction to your home. If you don't tell the agent you put in a pool, there's not going to be a proper coverage.
And plus, if it happened during a hurricane, that $12,000 deductible would apply to repairing it, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, if you look around the yard, got this white fence. White fence goes around the yard. It's about a $12,000, $13,000 fence 8-9 years ago. So it'd probably be a $15,000 fence today. Get a hurricane in August, it blows my fence down. How do you cover fence in hurricane situations?
Okay. If it is attached to your home,
Okay.
there are different rules. If it's attached to your home, then typically you have coverage. It may be actual cash value or it may be replacement cost. It depends on the policy. Again, in the villages, we don't see a whole lot of fencing, but if you have the fence, I'd suggest you get a current value on it and then call your agent to discuss it.
Okay. And then we have a little shed over here that holds tools and supplies. Of course, it has tools and supplies and has various things. If it burns down versus if it gets destroyed in a hurricane, how is that valued?
Okay, again, I'm going to say this a lot. You got to look at your policy because each company looks at your other structures differently. Some of them require you to schedule each detached structure that you might have. Some only give you 2% for your detached structures,
Okay.
which means if it was 2%, you might be exposed here and not have enough coverage. Something else I'd like to mention to you, if we're talking about a hurricane, let's say the garage door or the door isn't shutting properly and rain gets in. If that structure was not pierced by wind or hail, you may not have coverage for your contents that are in there and that are going to be damaged.
So for example, if you have a door that fell because it wasn't installed properly, there's a chance it may not be covered.
Exactly, because you've got to have structural impact, like a tree limb or the wind has to cause so much damage to that structure, it's pierced.
Angela, I have to ask another question. I got cars in the driveway. What happens to cars in a driveway, say if a tree falls on it or something like that?
Yeah, well, that would be an automotive claim. So first, we want to make sure you have comp and collision on your cars. If it's a falling object, it would be called comprehensive and you would have a deductible. Interestingly, because we do sometimes have flood is also covered on your cars for comprehensive, but flood's not covered on your house.
And I'm glad you brought up flood. Now, here in Lady Lake, we're not in the flood zone. And if it ever floods at this house, it will be of a biblical nature. But there are people in Lake and Marion, Sumter County, who are in flood zones. Flooding does not mean a stream or lake. It can mean a road where 2 or 3 houses are flooded, and that can happen on a thunderstorm. Tell us about flood insurance and why it's important you have flood insurance during a hurricane.
Okay, I want to take a moment and explain every home, every person is in a flood zone. It's just some are less likely to flood.
Right.
And we have a flood zone A. So we always wanted to earn A's in school. You don't want an A if you're in the flood zone.
So A is bad.
A is bad. And what it means is you're guaranteed to flood at least once every 100 years. I just talked to someone in Lake Panasoffkee 2 days ago, and she says, this house has been here for 50 years and we haven't had a problem. And what I had to explain, guess what? You are so much more likely now to have a flood because now it's not a 100-year window, you've got 50 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so flooding is rising waters from the outside that go in and invade your home. Okay, this can happen because your ground is saturated and we get so much rain quickly that the ground cannot handle it and it starts looking for places to go. In order to have that coverage, you need to have a flood policy. Some companies are offering private flood, which is sometimes more affordable unless you live near a body of water. From my experience, it's only about 20% of the companies. Otherwise, you can go and get a federal policy through FEMA. Now, one thing about flood, 2 things. It's got to impact 2 or more people in that area. And that's sometimes we forget about. If it's just one home, I would have to say it's a construction defect. There's an issue that needed to be addressed.
Right, drainage issue of that house.
Exactly. And then the second is that if you are seasonal, if you do not live in this house 90% of your time or more, you may be penalized and it may be actual cash value coverage and you wouldn't know it until the time of loss.
So for example, if I were in a neighborhood that flooded, there's 3 houses side by side here. Mm-hmm. If all 3 of us flood, at that point you'd have to have flood insurance.
Correct.
So flood's a major deal here with hurricane coverage. Angela, what should a homeowner do before, during, and after a storm?
Okay.
As far as their homeowner's insurance?
Okay, so we're starting hurricane season. So the first thing I really want my customers and clients to do, I want them to get their policies, have them handy.
Yep.
Second thing I want them to do is I want them to have a review, especially if you've made any changes to your home in the last year or 2, but also because you have explained construction costs have gone up so much, you want to make sure you have enough coverage for your home in the event of a big loss. The next thing, I want you to have a hurricane supply kit. And what I like on that, a tarp would be great because you never know if you might have something happen and you need to cover up a part of your home. I like to have a battery backup, something big enough and holds enough juice to maybe charge your laptop and your cell phone. You might spend a little money, but you know what? If it lasts you 5-6 years, it's worth the investment. And then I want you to have the phone number, obviously for your insurance agent, but more importantly, the phone number to the claims department for the company of which you're insured. Because if you have a claim, you are required to report it promptly. But also, if we have a big one, we're going to be waiting in line for service. And the sooner my clients can get in line, the sooner I can help them get a claim handled.
The worst thing, and we saw this during 2017, a lot of homeowners got hurt. They allowed these contractors to come in neighborhoods and they were signing agreements to give their rights away. You do not want to sign anything until you talk to your insurance agent. In fact, they just changed the law here in the state of Florida where a lot of that stuff is not permissible now. But as anything, you're going to have unscrupulous contractors. The worst thing you can do is get bullied into signing something right after a storm.
Absolutely. The first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is shop local. We always want to shop local. I don't want to see you using a traveling roofer that's coming door to door because that's kind of a dangerous sign. We want someone established here who has a reputation, and we also want someone who's going to have the proper insurance. They need to have liability. Yeah. They need to have workers' compensation. Also, it wouldn't hurt to ask them, what's your workforce like? Because goodness sake, if you've got a problem with your roof, we really don't want you waiting 9 or 10 months to get your roof handled.
Right. Last question. You've mentioned a review a few times. Tell us what you do during a review and why it's so important, again, to get a review. If a client, say, for example, you handle my insurance, I would sit down and get a review. What are you going to cover with me?
Okay. The first thing I'm going to ask you is I'm going to say, Don, have you made any changes to your property in the last years since we've talked.
Okay.
And I'll make a list of them. Then I'll go through and do something called a replacement cost estimator. And what it does is it takes the square footage, the features of the home, and it helps me calculate a cost to rebuild your house. That is what we need to have on your policy. Now, we're in special times right now. And I think we were in special times back in maybe 07 as well. We may find, and I'm hoping in like 3 years or so, if you and I met again, that maybe your cost to rebuild might be down a little bit and we can make an adjustment. But right now, I'm sorry folks, but you're gonna have to pay a little more and you need to increase your coverage so that you protect your biggest asset.
Okay. Angela, if someone had a question about their homeowner's policy or would like to do a review with you, how do they, first off, where's your office and how do they contact you to do that?
Absolutely. Our office is at 820 South Main Street in Wildwood, which is also 301. We are just about a mile from Brownwood, so we're very accessible, close to 44. And they could call us for an appointment. The phone number is 352-748-2221, and I and my team are there to help. Definitely, if you're busy, at least call your current agent, have them review the value, ask them about your screened enclosure. Get this information now and not after you have the claim.
But I have to ask this question. How do you call an online company where you have no service? Because I know after 2017, the most frustrating thing for the folks and a lot of our homeowners around the villages was they couldn't get a hold of nobody. How do you get a review with an online company?
That's funny. You know, you got to call the 800 number and hope that you get a good person. You got to hope that they might have a little bit of experience because sometimes they've been through a 40-hour class and they're put right on the phone lines, and that's scary.
Yeah. Well, I know after Hurricane Irma, a lot of people were calling you that didn't have insurance with you because they couldn't talk to no one on their online company.
No.
And that after the hurricane is when that's so funny. After the hurricane, you're going to find out how good or bad your insurance.
And your agency, because a lot of agencies don't follow up on claims like they should. I will tell you, financial stability of companies right now is so important. Many, because of all of the roof claims, they're having some financial problems. So it's really important. You know, I understand a budget and I understand that cost is important. However, you get what you pay for. And I have never seen a claim covered better because someone cut out a coverage.
Oh, absolutely. But Angela, I'll tell you, you've been a wealth of great information, and I hope you enjoyed it because that's information you need to know now and act on because hurricane season's here, and they're promising it's going to be a hurricane season of above average storms.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching Around the House today. Thank you, Angela, for being here. Be sure to go to aroundthehouse.tv for more helpful hints and advice. Until next time, we will see you around the house.